Hello BookTube, I'm Jonathan, and I hope you all had an amazing reading year, one filled with plenty of sci-fi, because sci-fi is the best fi. And it's time to find out the best of the best fi that I read this year, as I rank the 55 sci-fi books that I have read so far this year. So let's get into it and bring up our trusty tier maker, and let's rank some books from all-time favorite to excellent to very good to okay to not for me. So kicking off the year, we had Flow My Tears, The Policeman Said by Philip K. Dick. I'm going to put this one in good. At the start of the year, I had read 5 PKD books, and I've now read 10. So I did a little bit of digging into his catalog, and this one contains some of the great PKD elements. It's trippy, it's paranoid, it's creative. I really enjoyed this one, but it maybe didn't hit quite as hard for me as some other PKD books because I felt like the tone was a little too similar throughout, and there wasn't quite as much to root for or get invested in for me as there were some of other PKD books. But if you're looking for a darker PKD entry with some classic PKD elements, I think this one's going to hit for you. All right, up next, and oh no, oh no, 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 no. Okay, we have Hardboard Wonderland and the End of the World by Haruki Murakami. Those going straight to not for me because this book was not for me. It's only barely sci-fi in its defense. There's 2 storylines, one sort of a near future kind of crime story with a little bit of sci-fi in there, and then the other is a kind of obtuse fantasy story, and the 2 stories somewhat come together, and I just found it very slow, very boring. It didn't really explore the elements that I wanted it to, and the main character, man, this guy was cringy. Just the way he thinks about women, talks about women, interacts with women, just way too much creepy sex stuff in this book for me. And it can be hard to find that line between sort of sharp satire and social commentary and just kind of missing the mark. And this one missed the mark for me. We'll have to try another Murakami in the future. This was my first one, but we're not off to the best start. All right. Luckily, though, we bounce back. We bounce back with The Carpet Makers by Andreas Eschbach, a new all-time favorite. I love this book, and I was so surprised because it sounds like the thing that might not work for me because I'm not so much into short stories. I do prefer novels, and this is a novel, but it's a novel that is comprised of short stories that all form together to make a novel. Each story is kind of standalone. It completes its own nice little arc. It follows new characters each time, but then the stories all mesh together to complete a whole narrative. They weave together like the carpets made by the carpet makers themselves. I loved it. The ideas are incredible, cool sci-fi concepts, an intriguing world, and thematically very punchy. This just really resonated with me. A fantastic book. Please try The Carpet Makers if you haven't. I loved it. All right, moving on to another success story. We have Wizard and Glass by Stephen King, the 4th book in the Dark Tower series. I'm putting this in excellent. Another book I maybe wouldn't have expected to enjoy based on the pitch. Someone might say, Jonathan, this is the 4th book in the series, but most of it is a flashback. Okay? I'm like, oh, I don't know about that. And a big chunk of that's a love story. And I'm like, oh my goodness, what happened to the interesting horror, the sci-fi, the cool sort of multiple, all the crazy stuff that goes into a Dark Tower book? Well, don't worry. Have no fear. The flashback is incredible. It is endearing. It's captivating. It really develops the world. It really develops the characters. This is the book that made me love the quartet, that had me all in on the Dark Tower. I was along for the ride, and it does do some stuff at the beginning, at the end, which kind of connects it to the grander series and moves the story along a little bit in a fantastic way. I was a big fan of Wizard and Glass. All right, up next we have The City and the Stars by Arthur C. Clarke. One of my all-time favorite writers. I'm putting this in very good. The City and the Stars has an amazing opening. I loved the first 50 pages, setting up this world billions of years in the future, which is just bonkers to even try and imagine, and yet Arthur C. Clarke pulls it off. I think from there, the story's a little bit hit or miss. It meanders. There's some good points. There's some low points. I did enjoy it overall, but I think the beginning was the strongest part, so it goes in very good. All right, moving on, we have Blood Music by Greg Bear. I'm putting this in excellent. This has a really cool sort of Crichton-esque, sort of science gone wrong type premise to it. We have a person in a lab injecting something into themselves in order to test it, and things just kind of spiral out of control. And it's really fun kind of seeing how it goes wrong, what the consequences are, and there's some pretty high concept stuff in there too. On the harder sci-fi end, but I think a lot of people would enjoy Blood Music. Okay, up next, Kurt Vonnegut, my all-time favorite writer, with Slapstick. I'm going to put Slapstick in good. I did enjoy Slapstick, but the sort of the absurdity to poignancy balance maybe got a little out of whack at times. I maybe didn't personally connect to this one as much as I did some other Vonnegut books, but even a lower tier Vonnegut book, still good. I still enjoyed it. I still recommend it. There's some interesting commentary, some funny moments, very quotable, lots of funny stuff in there. All right. Ooh. This is unfortunately one of my disappointments of the year because I was so high on Deathstalker. It's kind of an underrated series. I've been telling people to give Simon R. Green a chance with Deathstalker. Well, I read the sequel, Deathstalker Rebellion, and the ratio of kind of like cheesy good to cheesy bad started to tilt a little the wrong way. So some of the sort of like pulpy elements that I enjoyed in the first book didn't quite hit the same way for me with the second book. A lot of my favorite characters just got sidelined. Like they were barely in it from the first book, which I was a little disappointed with. It kind of went wider in scope and as opposed to deeper on like the things that I think it was doing well, and I didn't necessarily care as much about sort of the broader aspects at play. And it felt very rushed. It felt like a little bit like a first draft. Simon R. Green really kind of cranked this out, and he kind of throws a lot of ideas here and there, and sometimes they stick. And in the first book, they stuck. In the second book, there's a little more misses for me in that one, so that's why it ends up in okay. All right. After that, though, we had The Futurological Congress by Stanislav Lem. Excellent. Lem is 2 for 2 with me now. I loved Solaris and I loved The Futurological Congress. This one was a little less philosophical, although still had some interesting themes, and a little bit more absurd, a little bit more humorous. Kind of felt like a mix between Solaris and maybe some Philip K. Dick in terms of the writing style here. I had a lot of fun kind of piecing together sort of the trippy elements and the way the story came together. For me, it was very satisfying. All right, on to Stories of Your Life and Others by Ted Chiang. I'm going to put this in good. So this is a short story collection and is often the case with story collections. There were some hits and some misses. I think the story which the film Arrival was based on was one of the strong points, and I really like the last story in the book. I'm forgetting the name of it, but it's about a type of technology which sort of influences your ability to perceive other people's faces and attractiveness. And I thought that was really well thought out in terms of the implications of that technology, and it's kind of delivered in this documentary style. But some of the other stories didn't hit as well for me. One of them made me downright mad, which I guess is good that it elicited a reaction, but maybe not the reaction that I was hoping for. I liked it. I liked it. Not as much as maybe some people, but I did think that was a good book. Okay, now we have Ray Bradbury's The Martian Chronicles. I'm putting this in very good. So this is kind of a fix-up novel comprised of short stories, but it was kind of all around. All of them are connected to this story about Mars, and there's some linkages between the stories which I enjoyed. And Bradbury's prose is just so beautiful. He's such an enjoyable writer to read. He could be writing about leaves falling, and he could probably hold my attention for a chapter or two. And I did like some of the stories. I felt like there were some interesting things to say. It's not super scientifically accurate, but that's okay. It's not like I'm coming to Ray Bradbury for hard sci-fi. I'm coming to him for the ideas, the prose, and this was, I don't know if cozy is the right word, because it does tackle a few heavy things, but it was an enjoyable, a pleasant read. Okay, now we have The First 15 Lives of Harry August by Claire North. I'm also going to put this in very good. This is a time loop story. The first 15 lives, that's a lot of lives. That's 6 more than a cat. And there's more to come. I guess, because that was only the first 15. How many more are there? You'll have to read the book and find out. If you like time travel, if you like time loop stories, I think this one does it very well. It's cleverly written, the pacing is fast. Now, I was burning through the pages with this one. I think it tackles some interesting themes, and I like the characters. But for me, this mostly delivered in terms of the plot. And I got this for my dad for Christmas. So maybe, maybe Papa Words in Time review of First 15 Lives coming next year. I'll let you know what he thought of it. All right. Ooh, moving on to one of my favorite series, Sun Eater, with Disquiet Gods by Christopher Rocchio. I'm putting this in excellent. So, this is the 6th book in the series. There is one more book to come. I'm going to guess late next year, fingers crossed, hoping for the final book. And this one, I think it did a great job of continuing the series, setting up the finale, and it's in the running for my favorite Sun Eater book because things just get super weird. Like the plot, the ideas just get kind of bonkers with this one, and I like it when Rocchio leans into the weirder aspects of Sun Eater. I think the only thing that held it back just the teensiest bit from being maybe my number one above Demon in White is that the supporting characters didn't feel as strong, like they had as much to do in this book, and some of that relationship stuff that I think Rocchio can do really well maybe wasn't at its strongest in this book, but some crazy high highs, some pretty amazing moments in Disquiet Gods. All right, after that, we go back to Kurt Vonnegut as I was finishing off his list of novels. I wanted to finish all the Kurt Vonnegut novels this year, and I did that with Deadeye Dick. Where will it go? Where will it go? Straight to the top, my friends. All-time favorite, Vonnegut. He did it again with a book that isn't even one of his most popular. This is considered maybe a mid to lower tier book of his. I don't know why, because I thought it was phenomenal. I thought this dealt with some amazing themes to do with weapons and war and technology and aging and kind of losing your sense of self and sexuality. And there's some really heavy stuff to do with like families and parents, and every single page just hit me in a different way. There was laugh out loud funny moments. There was times where I just kind of had to like sit for a second and think and decompress. I think this is truly a master at work. I think this is, for me, kind of the point of art, right? You know, you can create something that connects with other human beings. And I connected with this, and I connect with Kurt Vonnegut perhaps more than I do any other form of art in any medium. This is a truly special book to me, and I was lucky enough to find a signed limited edition version of the book, which is a treasured possession of mine. I'm very glad I read this, and I hope you guys will give it a read too. Okay, next up we have Electric Forest by Kenneth Lee. I'm putting this in very good. Kenneth Lee, this is kind of an interesting story. It kind of mixes sort of like the Ugly Duckling with Frankenstein in kind of like a sci-fi world, and she has a very interesting writing style. It's kind of choppy. It's kind of flowy and poetic, and then kind of has abrupt endings to sentences and transitions between them. It's a unique reading experience, and I really enjoyed it. The ending I'm mixed on. Some of you are going to love it. Some of you are going to hate it. You'll have to read it and let me know which side of that fence you fall on. Okay, and moving on, I think this is the last Kurt Vonnegut book that I read this year, Hocus Pocus. I'm putting in very good. I enjoyed this one. It was, as always, funny and poignant. It deals with a university that is nearby a prison, and these kind of storylines and themes intersect, and some great commentary, some funny moments. I'm not sure if the story hit for me overall as hard as my favorite Vonnegut books, but Vonnegut books are usually less about the plot and more about the ideas, so that's why it still ended up in the very good category. Okay, getting back to Stephen King and the Dark Tower, we have Wolves of the Calla. I'm putting this in very good as well. This is a very ambitious book. All of the Dark Tower books kind of combine genres, but this one really packs pretty much everything in, introduces some new characters. There's some great stuff here, although we kind of did get, I felt like we were getting bogged down with what's it called, like side quests. Like there's a thing that we're kind of building towards. It's kind of like, when you're playing an open world game and there's something that you really should be doing. The game is telling you is time sensitive, but you kind of get distracted by, foraging over here for items, and then some random asks you for help and you go on some other like site. I feel like this is what we should be focusing on, and the book didn't really do that. And then when we got there in the end, it was fine. It was good. I felt like it did something similar to the end of Wizard and Glass, and I liked it more in Wizard and Glass. But I'm a Dark Tower fan. So it still ended up in very good. Moving on, we have Dune Messiah. So the Dune films inspired me to continue the Dune series. What did I think of Dune Messiah? Very good. I liked it almost as much as the original Dune, but not quite. I think it did some interesting things thematically. I thought it sort of capped off some of the ideas from the first Dune book, but the plot was kind of told in an emotionally flat way. Like, interesting things happen, but they don't feel that big or important at the time. There's kind of a little bit of like a disconnect between the intellectual and the emotional here in terms of the reading experience for me, but I still thought it was very strong. It was a good Dune book. After Dune, and this might be one of my most controversial placements on the list. Let me try and attempt to justify myself. Christopher Priest and the Inverted World. I'm putting it in okay. Now, Inverted World has an amazing idea in it, possibly a top 10 sci-fi concept that I've ever read. Loved it. I think it's fantastic. And I think if this book was a short story, it would be one of my all-time favorite short stories. But unfortunately, it is packaged in a story that I did not really care for. There is a romance that I never got into, and the way the characters behaved, I didn't find overly believable, in the sense that there's kind of the mystery of this world, and everybody is withholding information from each other, and it makes no sense to do so, in my opinion. I think doing so is entirely irrational and dangerous, and is putting everybody at risk, and it serves no purpose other than Christopher Priest, in Inverted World, stretching out that mystery, prolonging the reveal. And I didn't like that. I didn't like feeling the author's hand in the book. So that dragged down my reading experience significantly, despite the fact that the ideas are awesome. There's some really, really cool stuff in there, and I get why people like it. Okay, going back to the Dark Tower, book number 6, Song of Susannah. I'm putting this one in good. This kind of felt like a bridge book between book 5 and book 7. And I get it, if you're a Dark Tower fan reading this at the time, you've been waiting years for books to come out, and you kind of feel like the story is stalling. I understand why you might get frustrated with this one. Luckily, I just got to read them pretty much back to back, one a month or something at this point. So that didn't bother me as much, and I liked some of the character moments. He kind of introduces some new ideas, Stephen King, he does here. I don't want to mention the specifics, but there's some kind of new stuff that he leans into here, which I liked, and I think it pays off in the next book. And there's a bit of a cliffhanger ending, but that's okay. I could just pick up the next one right away. So not one of my favorite Dark Tower books, but still good. Then we had Klara and the Sun. I'm going to put this one in excellent. I'm a little mixed on this one, but it's still going in excellent, and I'll tell you why. Because the reading experience is amazing. I felt like I just wanted to cry the whole time. I couldn't believe how emotionally connected I became to an artificially intelligent character. And I think that speaks volumes to Ishiguro's talent as a writer. I was just so thoroughly invested in this world and these characters. The ending, I just don't know how to feel about the ending, because at first it felt a little bittersweet, a little anticlimactic. I kind of felt like I was missing something. And then I did some digging online, found some sort of fan theories that I liked. I liked very much. They were much more rewarding. But then the responses to those theories kind of debunked them a little bit. So I just don't know how to feel about the ending. But if I can just put that to the side for a second, because I don't want to be. Sometimes when I think about this book, I think, oh, this was so close to being amazing. And I want to be positive. I want to reframe my brain instead of making it think that way. I want to think there were so many amazing things in this book. All right, we'll give myself time to process the ending. We'll let that kind of simmer over time. But for now, we're just going to focus on the positives. And This book had a huge emotional impact on me. I definitely need to read more Ishiguro. Okay, Dawn by Octavia E. Butler. I'm going to put this in very good. I think that the openings, the first act is awesome. This first contact story, it's mysterious, it's eerie, it's creepy. The atmosphere and the tone, Butler absolutely nails it. Then the second act, I think the way we kind of get to learn about the biology and the culture of the aliens and the interactions between them and humans is very interesting, but the story was maybe a little slow. I kind of got frustrated by some of the character decisions. And then the ending, unsettling ending. This is a book that really gets under your skin. So even though it wasn't one of my favorite books that I've ever read, it definitely leaves me with some ideas, some emotions that are going to stay with me for a while, and that's why it goes in very good. And the finale of The Dark Tower, Book 7, I am going to put this one all-time favorite. Wow. The Dark Tower. So this is kind of a polarizing finale to the series, and I can see why. I consider this to be a flawed masterpiece, kind of the way I view the Fall of Hyperion. There's some things in decisions that Simmons made in the Fall of Hyperion. They're just kind of like, what? But the high points are so high, I just don't care, and that's how I feel about the Dark Tower. There are there were at least 3 or 4 moments that in this book that made me cry, and any book that gets that level of reaction from me, so I'm not the biggest crier. I'll admit I cry here and there, not the biggest crier. So if you can do it multiple times, you've obviously done something well with your book, and I like the ending. I think the ending was perfectly suitable for what the Dark Tower was, what Stephen King was trying to achieve. Masterpiece. A flawed masterpiece, but a masterpiece nonetheless. Okay, up next we have The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet by Becky Chambers. I'm putting this in okay. It was cozy. It was enjoyable. It was pleasant. Everybody's nice to each other. It's a very heartwarming book. You know, the way that kind of these relationships form, develop, the way that conflict is resolved. Very healthy. If people behave like this in the real world, we'd all be much happier people. But it doesn't necessarily make for the most interesting reading. I felt like it was a little slow. I felt like all of the conflict was resolved way too quickly and too easily, and there were a couple of cool sci-fi concepts that I enjoyed, which meant it was still worth reading. But I didn't get a ton out of this, and I'm not super excited to continue with the rest of the series. Let me know. Let me know if you're a fan of Wayfarers. I thought it was okay. Now, back to Dune, we have Children of Dune, and I'm putting this in excellent. They're all quite close. I enjoyed at least the first 4 Dune books a relatively similar amount, but of the sequels, this might be my favorite. I thought the political intrigue was done perfectly. I liked some of the characters that were introduced, some cool moments, cool ideas. Like visually, there was a couple of moments which just kind of really felt alive in this book compared to Dune Messiah for me. I think it just needed one battle or one kind of high stakes duel to really just kind of up the ante and kind of take it to that top level. But of the Dune sequels, this is my favorite. Children of Dune goes in excellent. All right, Annihilation by Jeff Vandermeer. I'm putting this in good. It has a very well defined atmosphere, cool tone. It's kind of weird, it's creepy, it's unsettling. I just wanted more than that. I just wanted more than the vibe. I wanted more than the atmosphere in terms of the story development. And Jeff Vandermeer is maybe too withholding just by my own personal preference in terms of information distribution. I wanted just a little bit more. The story just didn't take me to that next emotional level, despite all the pieces around the story being artistically done. I think his prose, masterful writer. Just give me a little bit more juice, please, Jeff. All right, back to one of my favorites, Arthur C. Clarke with The Fountains of Paradise. I'm putting this in very good. So, The Fountains of Paradise, it tells the story of basically the attempt to build a tower into space. And it kind of combines a storyline from the past of humans attempting a similarly large project, which may offend the gods. So there's this kind of sort of like science and religion, mysticism, the kind of progression of human understanding of things throughout time, and how they may be far apart. We may have grown a lot, learned a lot, or maybe kind of humans are not in too dissimilar a place from where we were thousands of years ago. And I think some of the science is really cool. Clark does hard sci-fi well. There's kind of like some kind of tense Martian-esque Andy Weir moments towards the end in terms of problem solving under a time constraint. But there were periods in the middle where I felt like this was a little slow and a little dry, which prevented it being from one of my all-time favorite Clark books, but still a very good book. Next, another classic sci-fi book with Isaac Asimov, The End of Eternity. I'm putting in excellent. I think this is his most underrated book. I like this more than Foundation. I think it's possibly the best time travel book ever written. I'm going to have to do a little bit more research on time travel books, read some more, because it's a trope that I enjoy. So I can't say that definitively, but I can say that it's in the running for my favorite time travel book ever. If you like this one, if you like Asimov, read The End of Eternity. All right, back to Clark. I think I was doing a bit of a Clark Asimov month at the time, because we have another Clark book here, A Fall of Moondust. This one's going in very good as well. This is one of his earlier books. It is a little sort of smaller in scale. It's a little bit more focused than some other Clark books. So maybe a good one to start with if you're not as used to kind of like the big idea sci-fi. You want just kind of a more linear story to follow. It is some people that are trapped in a kind of transportation vehicle under a ton of dust on the moon. And it's a rescue mission. It's a survival story. It's kind of tense. Add some cool hard sci-fi in there to explain why it should be so tense. And I think it works really well. I had a fun time with this one. One of the more fast-paced and readable Clark books. All right, back to Asimov with The Caves of Steel. I'm putting this in good. It is a detective story set in the future with robots, and I thought the kind of like the world building, the stuff to do with the robots was pretty good. And I felt like the stuff to do with the mystery and the case and the detective story was pretty good. But I didn't feel like either of those aspects reach high heights, as good as Asimov has written in other books. But it's, like I just said about A Fall of Moondust, fairly readable. One of the faster paced Asimov books. So if you like detective sci-fi, give that one a try. Back to Clark with The Songs of Distant Earth. I'm putting this one in good as well. This is probably my least favorite Clark book, but I love Clark, so it still ends up in good. But it's the first Clark book that I've read that felt too long. It's like 300-ish pages, and most of his books are around 200. And they probably should be about 200 for a reason, because there's some good ideas in there, but this book didn't need to be 300 pages. But because of those cool ideas, it still gets to being good. All right, back to another one of my favorite authors, but a modern sci-fi author, the master of the space opera. It's Alistair Reynolds with Pushing Ice, and I'm putting it in very good. So, this is another fun space opera from Alistair Reynolds, although it kind of uses a bit of some tropes from the big dumb object subgenre. So, if you like a story about, there's a mystery in space. What is it? Where did it come from? Why is it here? What is it doing? Well, Reynolds tackles all of those in a fun way, and it's also one of his more character-driven books, which is a pro and a con, because I think it does add another layer of depth to the books beyond just its plot and the ideas. But I don't know if it's Reynolds' strength. Some of the relationship drama, the character drama, I thought it worked, but maybe could have been tightened, maybe could have been executed just that little bit better. But overall, yeah, sticks to the landing. Very fun book. It's going in very good. All right, you guys. We're going to need to talk about the consequences of this. There was a real fallout after this book. Semiosis by Sue Burke. It's going in not from me. And the drama here is because Viewers voted for this on Discord. I had some books on my TBR. I threw it up on Discord. I said vote for which I should read. Semiosis won the vote. And anyone who voted for it is now banned. You're all banned, kicked out permanently for eternity. I'm just kidding, not really. I can understand why people like this book. It has some cool biology-related stuff, first contact stuff. There's some good ideas here. I understand why people who are intrigued by it, who maybe hadn't read it before, or if you had read it, why you liked it. I didn't. I didn't like it because of the writing. This is the most I have ever struggled to read a traditionally published book because of the writing style. It felt like everything was a non sequitur. The sentences did not flow together well for me at all. The ideas bounced over all around the place. The dialogue made no sense to me. I gave this example in my review, but two characters are just sitting by some crops, and one of them says, "Oh, it's time to start planting so and so," and the other one says, "Are you sad about your dead girlfriend?" And I was like, "Whoa, whoa, smooth transition there, buddy. I don't think that's how people talk to each other. This doesn't feel real to me at all." So, yeah, I mean, if the writing style didn't bother you, I can understand why you liked it because there is some good science in here, so there is some good ideas. But just on like a sentence to sentence basis, I just did not jive with the prose, unfortunately. So, Semiosis, not for me. And if you voted for it, that's okay. I forgive you. No, you don't even need forgiveness. Stand by your vote. Be proud of your vote. If you like Semiosis, stand by it. All right, moving on and moving back to the Dune series, we have God Emperor of Dune, and I am putting this in very good. I enjoyed this book. I think it kind of goes in a bit of a weird direction. I think if you get told the premise of God Emperor, or you were to just read the first 50 pages, you might be in, you might be out. And if you're out, that's okay. I understand it. I was in. I liked it. I felt like some of the thematic explorations, some of the philosophy was really, really interesting. I felt like the main character was one of the best characters in the Dune series. The only reason why it's not higher for me is that I felt like it was kind of building and building and building. You know, it's a 600-page book, and it builds to something that just gets wrapped up in the last 10 pages. It felt just a little bit anticlimactic. I don't think the build-up paid off. So it's not my favorite Dune book, but just on a page-by-page basis, I was really enjoying God Emperor. All right, following up God Emperor, we have Mission of Gravity by Hal Clement. I'm putting this in okay, and I thought I would like this one. This is hard sci-fi. It kind of leans into a lot of things that I like about sci-fi. And I did think the ideas were cool. I thought the science was cool. It's a unique planet. The way that the science, the gravity, the temperatures, the pressure all affect the mission at hand is super cool. I love that kind of stuff in my sci-fi. The problem is, I didn't care about the mission. The book does not explain why the mission is important, what the stakes are, why it matters if the mission succeeds or fails. And so it didn't, I'm not going to say it read like a textbook because of that, but it reads more on the textbooky end of the scale if I'm not emotionally invested in the story. The hard sci-fi works for me if the hard sci-fi has a payoff, and it didn't really have a payoff for me in this book. So even though I think it's very well written, it's very clever, it achieves some things well, it's just okay for me. You didn't make me care about the mission. Norstrilia by Cordwainer Smith. I'm putting this in good. I think it has some cool. It kind of has some like PKD elements. It's kind of weird. It's kind of trippy. You have cat people. You have an immortality drug. There's a lot going on in terms of the world building, and there's some pretty kind of heavy sort of psychological things that are explored for the main character and others throughout this story, which kind of get revealed in little chunks throughout the novel. There were just a few too many moments where I was a bit bored or a bit like, where are we going? What's the point of this? You know, it was a little bit of an up and down experience for me. So high highs, but overall, the reading enjoyment ended up at good. Following that up with our second Bear book of the year with Eon, I'm putting this one in good. I enjoyed this one less than Blood Music, although I like the first half of the book a similar amount to Blood Music. It's a big dumb object story. I think the object is really intriguing. We learn some cool stuff. I think some of the character things that their development was kind of blending in well with the direction that the story was going. And then halfway through the book, it kind of takes a bit of a turn, and I really just didn't care for a lot of what happened in the back half. I kind of became detached from what was going on. Kind of some unnecessary sex scenes to add to that as well. So disappointing second half of the book, but it still ends up being good just because I thought the first half was great. All right, after that, I read Nonstop by Brian Aldiss. I'm putting this in very good. This was almost excellent because I love Brian Aldiss's prose. I think this did well what I didn't love about Nonstop. I thought in terms of intriguing world building where the author is not giving you all the information, but is just giving you little pieces of the puzzle, kind of drip fed it to you in a rewarding way. I was like a rat being given little bits of cheese, and I just wanted to eat more and more cheese, okay? The only thing I didn't like about this book is that it also includes something that seemed a little fantastical, a little nonsensical compared to the sci-fi in the rest of the book. It was a little bit of a distraction. I think if you cut that out, just trim this book a little bit, it'd be pretty close to perfect, because I think the elements that it does really well with this kind of, it's kind of like a Lord of the Flies situation with adults, kind of unlikable but very like entertaining and interesting, intriguing. I think all of that worked really well. So this was almost excellent. All right, moving on to Robert R. Heinlein with Starship Troopers. I'm putting this in okay. I think there was some interesting topics of discussion, some interesting philosophy, political discussions, some kind of interesting stuff in terms of like military sci-fi that was very sort of influential and ahead of its time. But Heinlein to me was a bit preachy. I felt like this book kind of felt like him using one of the main characters to just get up on a soapbox and rant at the reader. And he kind of gives off the vibe that Heinlein feels like he's the smartest guy in the room, which may or may not be the case. I thought some of the things were very interesting. Some of the things I felt missed the mark. So this was worth reading. I think it was important in terms of sort of sci-fi history. And if you like that style where you just kind of have like a character exploring a topic or a theme, I think you're going to enjoy this one. But in terms of military sci-fi, entertaining me with the ideas, it was thought-provoking, but I didn't necessarily enjoy it that much. Okay, getting back to Dune, we have Heretics of Dune. This is also going in okay. So I really like the first 4 books of Dune. Heretics, it takes a bit of a turn. So we have time jumps between some of the books, which didn't bother me before, but now it kind of really feels like we're starting something new, and that new thing just wasn't all that interesting to me. You know, we have a kind of like a new group of people that kind of like similar to the Bene Gesserit, but like just sexier, I guess. And it just didn't quite feel as clever or thought provoking or new as it did in the earlier Dune books, and it kind of recycles some ideas. Some things felt like a little bit repetitive concept wise, so it was okay. I mean, Herbert's still a good writer, still thought provoking at times, but not one of the strongest Dune books. All right, now we have Margaret Atwood with The Handmaid's Tale. I'm putting this in excellent. I had read one Atwood book before, and that was Oryx and Crake, which I liked, but not as much as this. I felt like The Handmaid's Tale, it did such a good job of kind of delivering pieces of information to you about this world from a person with limited knowledge and understanding. So, you know, seeing the world from a certain perspective, I think was done really well. And you get inside the head of this character, you feel what it's like to experience the things that this character is experiencing, and it also presents things in a kind of way that's, you know, that you can kind of grapple with individually, as opposed to feeling like you've just kind of been delivered the message didactically. And I really enjoyed kind of grappling with this world, thinking about the ideas in this book. And it was a touch slow at times. I got the tiniest bit bored at moments, but I felt like in the back half, it kind of really ramped up the emotional stakes and the ending. I remember getting to the last 10 pages of this book, and I could actually feel my heartbeat through my chest. I was really on the edge of my seat, and so anything that gets me that invested in a story deserves to go in excellent. And then we have the final of the original 6 Dune books written by Frank Herbert. Okay, Chapterhouse Dune, it goes in okay. I had a lot of the same issues with Heretics as I did for Chapterhouse, so I guess I won't repeat myself. It was fine. It was okay. I'm glad I finished the series, but the first 4 were definitely much better for me. All right, Michael Crichton with the Andromeda Strain. I'm putting this in good. I felt like it has a good premise. Crichton always kind of thrusts you into an interesting situation. It's a techno thriller because the pacing is good. He gives you lots of information to digest, which is kind of interesting. The characters here are all a little bit flat. Had a little bit of trouble differentiating between the voices of some of the characters, and the ending was just kind of fine. But I think he squeezed enough juice out of the premise that I still enjoyed this one. I had a good time reading the Andromeda Strain. I think I was reading some Crichton, some kind of spookier stuff, creepier stuff for October spooky season. So I read another Crichton book, Sphere. I'm going to put this in very good. I like this one a little bit more than the Andromeda Strain. I think it kind of nailed the atmosphere of kind of being down deep below the water. You're not sure what's going on. There's kind of a mystery here. You start to question yourself. You question the people around you. And I think Crichton did that really well. And I burnt through this one pretty quickly. I feel like the pacing was fantastic. The ending, yeah, okay, okay. Yeah, the ending was good, but that's okay. I enjoyed the rest of the book enough where I think this belongs in very good. All right, going back to PKD with Time Out of Joint, one of his earlier books. I'm going to put this one in good. And I think if I had read this book earlier in my PKD journey, it might be slightly higher because I think it does a lot of the things that PKD is known for, but he does them better in his later books. You can see him sort of like developing his style here. It is a trippy world. There are some questions, some mysteries as you try and unfold exactly what is going on, and I did like that. But I didn't really connect with the characters, and I thought the story and the development of that kind of surreal world was executed better in his later work. And up next, we have another kind of trippy book with Ice by Anna Kavan. I'm putting this in good. I really enjoyed the opening of this book. I think the prose is very vivid, and it was kind of interesting being in this person's head, kind of seeing the way they see the world. And it has this kind of fairy tale quality to it where everything kind of seems a bit convenient, and you're not really sure if you believe exactly what's happening. And that's kind of an interesting reading experience. I also thought it was thematically poignant. Some things hit pretty hard in this book, and I'll definitely remember this book for a long time. But unfortunately, for me, it was quite repetitive. It felt like it had a particular beat that it hit, and then the story would repeat, and it would hit that beat again and again and again. And I think that kind of might have been the point of the book because it did sort of feel like this recurring nightmare, but it just sort of had a less of an emotional impact each time for me. So that's why I ended up in good as opposed to a little bit higher, even though it had some high points. Martian Time-Slip by PKD. I'm putting this in good. This one deals with some interesting things to do with mental health issues, including autism and schizophrenia. And I think it was ahead of his time, written in the 60s. I'm not exactly sure how much was really known about some of those illnesses then compared to what we know about them now. And PKD explores them in an interesting way. There's really interesting moments where you're like, okay, is what's happening what I think is happening? What are the hidden meanings behind these things? Because all of PKD's books are so layered, and I think this one had some high points. He just took a little too long to get into it, to develop the world. Around like 100 pages in, I wasn't really enjoying this one that much, but it did end up paying off. I did like this one, and it goes in good. Up next, we have Daemon by Daniel Suarez, and I'm putting this in excellent. It is a modern day, or at least it was modern when it was written in 2006, modern day techno thriller / cyberpunk novel, which deals with the passing of a famous video game developer. And this triggers all sorts of crazy cyber-related events. People start dying, mystery is afoot, we go on an adventure, and I was just burning through the pages. Every chapter had me hooked. It was just reel me in, Mr. Suarez. I'm along for the ride. This is book one in a duology. And halfway through the book, I bought the sequel because I knew I was going to be reading it. All right. Up next, we had The Lathe of Heaven by Ursula K. Le Guin. I'm putting this in very good. I had read one Le Guin book before this, The Left Hand of Darkness, which I was a little mixed on. This one I really enjoyed. We have a person that dreams these vivid dreams that can affect reality, and they go to a therapist, and the therapist can maybe help them or maybe influence their dreams for their own agenda. And it's a really sort of interesting philosophical discussion, thematic discussion in terms of things like free will and ethics. And it's a very focused book. What I liked about this book was Le Guin had a particular idea in mind, things she wanted to explore, and she focused on them and executed them to a T. I think this book achieved what Le Guin set out to achieve, and I had fun while reading it. All right, next up we have Light by M. John Harrison. I'm putting this in okay. So this was compared to The Quantum Thief by Hannu Ryanimi, which I absolutely loved when I read that last year, I believe. I see the comparisons. They are actually quite similar. They're both set in these far future settings with crazy quantum technology. There's a lot of technobabble. You don't understand the world. You don't understand a lot of the jargon. And part of the fun is putting all of those pieces together. The thing is, it just wasn't a lot of fun putting the pieces together because I hated all the characters. The story just moved really slowly. I didn't like the tone. I didn't like the feeling I got while reading this book was just so dark and grim and negative, and there's so many sex scenes. Like, I'm not exaggerating, guys. There's probably 30 to 40 sex scenes. Like, most of them are brief, but even a couple of them are kind of long and graphic. And I just didn't know why. I just really didn't know where the story was going, what Harrison wanted to say, and I just didn't resonate with what this book was doing. I think he's very clever, and I think his prose is actually very strong. But the story itself, I did not personally relate to or enjoy. So it ends up in okay. All right, back to PKD with The Penultimate Truth. I'm putting this in okay as well. I think this is some of his most detailed world building, but a reason why I struggled with this one is that there's so many characters, especially for kind of like a short PKD book, and they were very hard to differentiate. They all kind of sound the same. I had a very different hard time remembering who is who, and that's not something I usually struggle with too much while reading sci-fi. And I kind of did with this one, and I think it just sort of lost me. And even though there are some interesting ideas, maybe because I was struggling to latch onto the story, those ideas didn't hit me as hard as maybe they could have. And there's also a bit of a mystery element to this book, but I feel like it gives you most of the info up front, and then the ending, when you get the final couple of pieces, you kind of like, oh yeah, that sort of makes sense. I kind of already guessed that. So this one didn't land as hard for me as other PKD books did, but I might need to read it because I think there is some interesting stuff going on thematically. I just was not connected to the story. All right, back to Daniel Suarez with the follow-up to Daemon. We have Freedom TM. I'm also putting this in excellent. A lot of the things that I liked about Daemon, I liked about Freedom TM. The pacing was amazing. And the ideas and the story actually gets even bigger and wilder and crazier in this one, which has its pros and cons because some of the chapters were just so cool, so fun. It's a really unique reading experience. I'd love to see these books made into movies if you had like $1 billion budget to try and pull it off. But that sort of came at the sacrifice of a little bit of character development. Some of the characters from the first book didn't maybe get as much time as I felt like they needed in the second book. And it was a tiny bit messy. So I think Daemon I'd give the edge just for being a little bit more focused. But they're both super fun. They're both excellent. Go ahead and read Daemon. All right, getting down to our last couple of books, we have Vurt by Jeff Noon. I'm also putting this in excellent. This is possibly the most unique book I read this year. We have this group of characters that are addicted to sucking on these things called Vurt feathers, which give them this kind of high of being in a virtual world. And it kind of gives you the feeling of like cyberpunk, like a neuromancer, but also it's kind of like a dystopian future of kind of like a group of reprobates, like in a Clockwork Orange. It has some kind of dark things to do with addiction, like the film Trainspotting. It is also kind of humorous at times. This is just a wacky, wacky book, and I was totally on board, even though I didn't understand all of the terminology at first, even though some of it's kind of a little grim in terms of the violence, the sexual content. It was just so original, so unique. I've never had so much fun exploring such a chaotic world before. I didn't want to put this book down, even when there were times where I like wanted to look away. I couldn't look away just because I needed to know what happened next. Um, I can't say I loved everything in this book, but it's a book that I can't stop thinking about. You know, this isn't necessarily the type of book that I think I would love, and yet I'll never forget it. And that means it is excellent. All right, moving on to Starfish by Peter Watts. I'm putting this in very good. I was a big fan of Blindsight, and I think Peter Watts achieves some of the same things here with Starfish. There's some amazing ideas, some amazing hard sci-fi. Similar to Sphere, you're down under the water. It's kind of creepy. I think he nails the tone. It does feel a little bit like sort of connected ideas as opposed to a really solid narrative. I don't think the plot is the strength of the book, but I love the ideas, and that's kind of what I read Peter Watts for. I love the tone, even though it's very uncomfortable. Like high levels of trauma in this book, which may not be for everyone, but if you're looking for something dark, it's gonna kind of mess up your night's sleep. You might not be able to sleep too well after reading Starfish. This could be the book for you. And finally, we end where we started with a PKD book, and we end on a high with A Maze of Death. I'm putting this in very good as well. A Maze of Death brings together an interesting cast of characters to a certain planet with not a lot going on. And the characters don't exactly know why they're there, who the other people are, and we kind of have this band kind of get together in order to learn about each other, their purpose there, and as always, in every PKD book, things are not as they seem. And this book kind of explores some interesting things to do with the combination of religion and technology, and I thought it worked really well. And I think the pacing was great. I think this is one of the most well-paced PKD books that I've read, and it has some really, really interesting ideas. The ending's pretty cool. I don't know if everybody will love the ending, but I felt like it worked well, kind of tying up, you know, and the revealing things that we've been kind of searching for throughout the book. And I'll be thinking about this one for a while. I think the way that it tackles the concept of death, not surprising as that word is in the title, I think was done amazingly. Ooh, rough way to finish the video. So there you go, guys. That is my ranking for every sci-fi book I read this year. I'd say it was a good one. Perhaps a very good one, seeing as that is the most popular category in the rankings that I gave. And quite a few new favorites. Some of those books in excellent, I really, really loved. And yeah, 3 books made the all-time favorite category. It's going to be interesting at some point in the future when I do a new, you know, all-time top 20, top 10, whatever it ends up being list. Those guys are going to be in contention. So there you go. I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know what are some of your favorite books that you read this year. Maybe some least favorites if you feel like being negative. We try to promote positivity here on the channel, but it's okay. Sometimes books don't work for you. A couple of books didn't work for me this year. But overall, we had a good time. And if you had a good time watching this video, feel free to hit that subscribe button. And if you really enjoyed it, consider checking out the perks of becoming a Patreon member, where you can become one of my robots, androids, or cyborgs, like Nima, and New Eden, Half Ogre, Zakawe, and the Unrankable Colin. And you can find more sci-fi content, nope, yes, over here.